My name is Eliza, and I thought I had it all figured out. At 30, I was married to the love of my life, Michael, and we lived in this cozy, though tiny apartment in one of the city's most sought-after areas. This place, with its quaint charm and memories, was a gift from my late grandmother. Michael and I were like two peas in a pod. He worked in finance, always dressed in those sharp suits that made him look so handsome. I worked in marketing, a job I loved for its creativity and pace. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. One lazy Sunday morning, as we were having breakfast, Michael brought up the topic of family, a conversation we had danced around for a while. "Eliza, I've been thinking," Michael began, his eyes serious, "about us, about starting a family." I felt a flutter in my heart. "Really? That's great. I've always dreamed of a big family," I replied, my voice filled with excitement. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want that too, but let's wait until we have a bigger place. This apartment is too small for a family." I nodded, though a part of me felt a bit disappointed. "You're right. It makes sense. We should sell this place first, right?" "Exactly," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Once we sell your grandmother's apartment, we can buy a house big enough for, say, 3 or 4 kids." I laughed. 4 kids? That's a mini army. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. It was like a small cloud on a sunny day. Family gatherings were a big thing in Michael's family. His parents, Robert and Martha, were the warmest people you'd ever meet. They welcomed me into their family with open arms. Then there was Alex, Michael's younger brother, who was married to Sarah. They had 2 adorable kids, but Sarah and I never clicked. She was always a bit cold and distant, and sometimes downright rude. During one such family gathering at Michael's parents' house, she made a snide remark about my cooking. "Eliza, maybe you should stick to marketing and leave the cooking to us homemakers," she said, a fake smile plastered on her face. I remember feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Michael jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, I love Eliza's cooking, right, Dad?" he said, looking at his father, who nodded in agreement. The evening passed with more awkward moments, but I tried to brush them off. I loved Michael, and I was determined to make things work, even with Sarah. As we lay in bed that night, I turned to Michael. "Do you think Sarah doesn't like me?" Michael, already half asleep, murmured, "Don't worry about her. You're amazing, and that's all that matters." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But deep down, I knew that things were not as perfect as they seemed. And little did I know, my world was about to turn upside down. A few weeks had passed since that conversation with Michael about starting a family. The idea of waiting for a bigger home had settled in my mind, though I still held on to the dream of a large family. It was a chilly December morning, and I was tidying up the apartment while Michael was at work. I decided to clean out the coat closet. It was overflowing with jackets and coats we hardly wore. As I was going through Michael's coats, I felt something in the pocket of his winter jacket. Curious, I pulled it out. It was a receipt. At first, I thought it was just another receipt for coffee or something mundane, but this was different. It was a receipt for a scarlet-colored designer bag from a high-end store known for its romantic gifts. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be for me? I wondered aloud, a smile spreading across my face. Michael had never been the type to splurge on extravagant gifts, but maybe this was his way of showing his love, especially with Christmas just around the corner. That evening, when Michael came home, I decided not to mention the receipt. I wanted to act surprised when he gave me the gift. We sat down for dinner, and I couldn't help but feel a bit giddy. "Michael, what are we doing for Christmas?" I asked casually. He looked up from his plate. "Oh, the usual. Dinner at my parents'. Why, you got something special in mind?" I shook my head. No, just the usual sounds perfect. The days leading up to Christmas were busy with work and preparations for the holidays. But that receipt stayed in the back of my mind. I imagined how that scarlet bag would look with my New Year's outfit. Finally, it was Christmas Eve. We were at Michael's parents' house, the whole family buzzing with festive cheer. Presents were piled under the tree, and I kept sneaking glances at them, trying to spot a bag-shaped gift. Eliza, can you help me with the dessert? Martha, Michael's mom, called out from the kitchen. Of course, Martha. Be right there, I replied, happy to lend a hand. As I helped her with the pie, I mentioned the gift. Michael's been acting a bit secretive. I think he's planning a surprise for me. Martha smiled. That boy always has something up his sleeve. You're good for him, Eliza. The time came to open the gifts. My heart raced as Michael handed me a medium-sized, neatly wrapped box. It didn't feel like a bag, but maybe. I tore open the wrapping paper to find a set of beautiful porcelain dishes. I looked up at Michael, confused. Surprise! I know you've been wanting a new set for when we host dinners, he said, smiling. I forced a smile. They're lovely, Michael. Thank you. But inside, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Where was the scarlet bag? Why did he buy it if not for me? The Christmas dinner at Michael's parents' house was in full swing. The house was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm glow of holiday lights. I tried my best to push the thoughts of the scarlet bag out of my mind and focus on the festivities. Eliza, could you pass the gravy? Alex, Michael's brother, asked from across the table. Sure, here you go, I replied, passing the gravy boat down the table. Michael's parents were beaming, happy to have their family around them. His mother, Martha, always went all out for Christmas, and this year was no exception. The dinner was delicious, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. After dinner, we all moved to the living room for the gift exchange. I watched as Michael's nieces tore open their presents with glee, their faces lighting up with each new toy they uncovered. It wasn't until we were getting ready to leave that I noticed something that made my heart stop. There, slung over Sarah's shoulder, was a striking scarlet-colored designer handbag. It was unmistakable, the very same bag from the receipt I had found in Michael's coat. My mind raced as we said our goodbyes. I couldn't take my eyes off that bag. It was more than just a purse. It was a symbol of something hidden, something unspoken. On the drive home, the car was filled with an uneasy silence. Michael seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. As the city lights passed by, my mind replayed the evening, but this time I saw it through a different lens. I remembered the fleeting glances that Michael and Sarah had exchanged throughout the night. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, but now they seemed glaringly obvious. The way their eyes met across the room, the brief smiles, the quick, hushed conversations when they thought no one was looking. Is everything okay, Eliza? You've been awfully quiet. Michael's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to look at him, 1,000 questions on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to voice any of them, not yet. I'm just a bit tired, that's all, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. The rest of the drive home was spent in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal creeping in. The man I loved, the life we had built together, suddenly everything seemed like a fragile facade, ready to crumble at any moment. In the days that followed Christmas, my mind was in turmoil, haunted by the sight of Sarah with that scarlet designer handbag and the subtle glances exchanged between her and my husband, Michael. The nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. One cold evening, as Michael sat idly flipping through TV channels, I decided to confront him. Michael, can we talk? It's about the bag, I said, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. He looked at me with a casual expression. What about it? I just helped Alex pick out a surprise for her, that's all. I took a deep breath. I found the receipt, Michael. It was in your coat. Why didn't you tell me? He let out a small laugh, trying to wave it off. Oh, that. It was just a favor for Alex. You're thinking too much into it, Eliza. His response did little to soothe my suspicions. Later that night, as Michael lay asleep, I mustered up the courage to look through his phone. My heart pounded as I scrolled through his messages and stumbled upon a thread that would change everything. The conversation between Michael and Sarah was not just flirty. It was intimate, revealing a deep and long-standing affair. But the true shock came when I read a message where they discussed the biggest secret of all. Alex's children were actually Michael's. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband had been in a relationship with his brother's wife, and the children I'd come to adore as my nephews were in fact my stepchildren. I felt sick to my stomach as I read message after message. They spoke of love, of a future together, and, most shockingly, of convincing me to sell the apartment and move the money to a joint account. Tears streamed down my face as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. I was quick to screenshot the messages, sending them to my email for safekeeping. With a heavy heart, I deleted any trace of my actions from his phone and lay back, my mind spinning with the enormity of the deception. The next morning, I played the part of the unsuspecting wife. Over breakfast, Michael brought up selling our apartment, a conversation we'd had previously. "So, what do you think about the sale? It could be a good move for us." I nodded, my mind racing with plans of my own. "Yes, let's sell it. It's time for a new beginning," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos within. He smiled, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That's my girl, always so decisive. Little did he know, I was thinking about my future, but it was a future that was starting to look very different from the one we had planned together. Armed with the bitter truth about Michael's affair and the shock of his betrayal, I knew I needed to act smartly and swiftly. I put on a mask of normalcy in front of Michael while planning my next steps. A few days later, I made an appointment with a lawyer, Mrs. Jenkins, a recommendation from a close friend. Sitting in her office, I felt a mix of nervousness and determination. "Mrs. Jenkins, I have proof of my husband's infidelity, and it's not just any affair. He's been involved with his brother's wife, and their children are actually his," I explained, my voice trembling slightly. Mrs. Jenkins listened intently, her expression serious. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Eliza. Let's go over the evidence you have. We need to plan your next steps carefully." I showed her the screenshots of the messages between Michael and Sarah. She took notes, nodding her head thoughtfully. "This is quite damning evidence. We can use this in your favor, especially in terms of the financial settlement," Mrs. Jenkins said. "However, I advise discretion until we have everything in place. Are you prepared to go through with a divorce?" "Yes, I am. I can't be with someone who's betrayed me like this," I replied, a sense of resolve building within me. Mrs. Jenkins outlined a plan. First, we'd secure my financial assets, especially the money from the apartment sale. Then, we'd proceed with filing for divorce, using the evidence to negotiate a favorable settlement. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There was a long road ahead, but I was ready to take it. Back at home, I continued to act as if everything was normal. Michael, oblivious to my discovery and the impending storm, was focused on the apartment sale. "So, I talked to a real estate agent today. He said we could get a good price for the apartment," Michael said one evening over dinner. "That's great news," I replied, keeping my emotions in check. "Do you think it's a good time to put it on the market?" "Absolutely. The sooner we sell, the sooner we can start looking for a new place," he said, unaware of the irony in his words. As the days passed, I worked closely with Mrs. Jenkins, preparing all the necessary documents and securing my financial position. Every conversation with Michael, every smile, was a performance. But it was a performance I needed to maintain a little longer until everything was ready. The day we listed the apartment for sale, Michael was ecstatic. "This is it, Eliza, our new beginning." Little did he know, it was indeed the beginning of something new, but not the future he envisioned. My heart ached with the pain of betrayal, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. The plot I was weaving wasn't just for retribution, it was for my independence and a fresh start. As the new year approached, the plans I had been carefully laying with Mrs. Jenkins were coming together. My facade of normalcy with Michael remained intact, even as my heart grew heavier each day. The final act of my plan was set to unfold during the New Year's Eve party at Michael's parents' house. It was there that I would reveal everything. The evening of the party arrived, and the house was buzzing with the usual festive cheer. Michael's parents had outdone themselves with decorations, and the air was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I mingled with the family, all the while feeling like I was in the eye of a storm. Michael was in high spirits, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Eliza, you seem a bit quiet tonight. Everything okay?" Michael asked as we found a moment alone in the kitchen. Just thinking about the new year and all the changes it'll bring, I said, my voice steady. He smiled and wrapped his arm around me. It's going to be our best year yet. If only he knew. As midnight approached, everyone gathered around with glasses in hand, ready to count down to the new year. I took a deep breath, knowing that my moment was near. As the clock struck 12 and everyone cheered, I turned to Michael. Before we celebrate too much, I have a special gift for you, I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I handed him a small, neatly wrapped box. The room quieted as all eyes turned to us. Michael, looking surprised, unwrapped the box. Inside were the divorce papers and a printout of the messages I had found on his phone. His face drained of color as he realized what they were. "What is this, Eliza?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's over, Michael. I know about you and Sarah. I know about everything," I said, my voice clear and strong. The room erupted into chaos. Michael's parents looked shocked, his brother Alex was speechless, and Sarah, who had been standing near the back, looked like she might faint. "What are you talking about, Eliza?" Michael's mother asked, confusion and concern in her voice. "Michael has been having an affair with Sarah, and her children are his," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Michael tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah started crying, and Alex, who had been silent up until now, turned to his brother. "Is this true, Michael? Tell me this isn't true." Alex's voice was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Michael couldn't meet his brother's eyes. The truth was out there for everyone to see, and there was no escaping it. The revelation at the New Year's Eve party sent shockwaves through the room. Michael's family, once a picture of unity and joy, was now a scene of chaos and disbelief. The truth about Michael's affair with Sarah and their plan to embezzle the money from my apartment sale was out, and the reactions were immediate and intense. Michael's mother, Martha, looked at him with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "Michael, how could you? And with Sarah? To think you were planning to steal from Eliza and run away." Before Michael could respond, I added, "And it's not just the affair. They were planning to use the money from the sale of my apartment to leave the country." The room went silent. The gravity of the betrayal hung heavy in the air. Then, Martha, overcome with emotion, fainted, causing a stir as family members rushed to her side. Michael stood there, looking lost and defeated. His father, Robert, shook his head in disgust. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family, to your own brother." Alex, who had been silent, his face a mask of shock and hurt, finally spoke. "Michael, I don't even know who you are anymore." Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, her tears doing little to garner any sympathy. The family was too stunned and hurt by the depth of their deceit. With Martha being attended to and the room in disarray, I knew this was my moment to make my stand. I raised my voice, ensuring everyone heard me clearly. "I am filing for divorce from Michael, and I won't just stop there. I will be seeking financial compensation for this betrayal from both Michael and Sarah." The words felt empowering to say out loud. It was a declaration of my independence and my refusal to be a victim of their selfishness. Michael tried to approach me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Eliza, please, let me explain." I held up my hand to stop him. "There's nothing you can say to justify what you've done. You and Sarah have made your choices. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences." The months following the New Year's Eve revelation were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings were tough, but with each passing day, I felt a sense of liberation growing within me. I was no longer bound to a relationship built on lies and deceit. One sunny afternoon, after finalizing the last of the divorce papers, I sat in a cafe, a cup of coffee in hand, reflecting on the journey I had been through. "You look like you're a million miles away," my friend Clara said as she joined me at the table. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," I replied, offering a small smile. "You've handled it all with such grace, Eliza. I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. "Thanks, Clara. It wasn't easy, but I feel like I can finally start fresh now," I said, feeling the weight of the past months lift off my shoulders. With the divorce settled, I had kept the apartment and received a significant financial settlement from Michael. As for him, His reputation had taken a severe hit, and he lost his job due to the scandal. Sarah and Alex had also gone their separate ways, with the family ties deeply strained. "I heard Michael moved out of the city," Clara mentioned, stirring her coffee. "Yes, he did. And honestly, I'm relieved. It's easier to move on knowing he's not around," I admitted. "And what's next for Eliza?" Clara asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. I thought for a moment. "I want to focus on myself for a while. Maybe travel, pick up some hobbies that I've been neglecting, and who knows, perhaps even start dating again when I'm ready." "That sounds wonderful. You deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. As we chatted and laughed, I felt a sense of hope for the future. The pain of the past was still there, a faint scar on my heart, but it no longer defined me. I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. The story of my marriage and its dramatic end would always be a part of me, but it was now just that, a part of my past. Ahead of me lay a path filled with new possibilities and opportunities for growth and happiness. It was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something new, something entirely my own. A fresh start, a new beginning, and a life that I was ready to embrace fully.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.